Huge welcome everybody to Eigen TV. Today we've got an exciting topic for you, and we'll be talking about the future of digital twin. Dave Hodgson and Andrew Delugar have joined us from KBR. And if you actually go back on our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see that we did an entire digital twin series with these two lovely gentlemen. So please do go back and watch that. And of course, if you've got any comments whatsoever, pop them below and we will get back to you as quickly as we can. So a huge welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Murray, I'll leave it to you to open up the session.
Thanks, Effie. So last time we talked about what is a digital twin, and we thought this time it would be interesting to see about what's the future for digital twins, and maybe where are we now and how do you get there? And we've got a couple of examples we can talk over, and if we have time, we'll also get onto the bigger question of a digital twin for the UK, which is a huge use case. So maybe Dave, if I'll open up with a question to you then. We've said that the digital twin isn't just a 3D model, it's a collection of systems. So what do you think are the important steps for building one, given where the industry is currently at?
I think what the most important thing is at any step, we mustn't alienate the engineers, the people that use it, the real people. So we need to sometimes slow our pace down. The technology is out there for doing the most amazing things. But if we launch this new technology at engineers without really preparing them in many ways, we're going to struggle to get that implemented. I think that's the story of the past when we introduced data management systems. You and I know all about this. We introduced a new for the data people, but the engineers just turned their backs on it because they didn't really feel it was part of their remit. They didn't feel they needed to be involved. It was too high tech for them. It was asking too much of them, and therefore they didn't really get involved. I think that's something we need to learn our lesson from about the future, and only take small incremental steps with a view to a longer vision, a greater vision, that we will get there. It just might take a while.
Yeah, I think that's entirely valid. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, no, I think there's tremendous potential, Murray. I think I always get back to the sort of basic principles, and I think what's the product that we're coming up with and what are the benefits of it? And it's actually about communicating that as much to people. So it's not a threat, it's actually tremendous what it can do, improving safety, improving efficiency, improving communication across what we do. So I think a little bit more definition of the actual product that's coming out and how it applies into real life things, it would really be beneficial.
So here's a thought then. How much of the interaction with the digital twin do you think is going to be structured, as in a defined process, versus unstructured? So Dave, you've talked about engineers. We mustn't alienate the engineers. So that's implying that the main users will be the engineers. But in my experience, a lot of the work that's being done day to day is ad hoc at the engineering level, because it's root cause analysis, it's validating work plans. And so you need to look at changes based on what you've got to do. But there's other work processes that are going on that are more structured. So Andrew, you've just talked about safety and having certain analyses or regular views of the status of something, let's say. An ad hoc use of a digital twin might require quite a high level of competency to be able to sort of ask the right questions, whereas a structured approach could be, you could hide a lot of that complexity and it might just be a fixed view. So do you think the audience will be across the organization then, with a variety of these different types of users?
I think it will be across the organization. I think there's a case for both, Murray. That the standard get a quick answer or a known answer using an establishing, but it's also very interactive and the ability to interrogate it. But you kind of mentioned before, there is a risk. I always think if you go in and you don't ask a complete question, or if you perhaps put some wrong parameters in, people could derive very quickly a wrong answer. So it needs some checks and balances, which I know David's got some quite strong thoughts about this.
Yeah, you absolutely need checks and balances. You need checks and balances in anything you do, especially when safety is paramount, and not spending excessive amounts of money, losing control of a project and that kind of thing. But from a point of view of the structure, I think the ideal should come when the structure is so elegant that you don't really notice it, or it's so much part of our thinking. I mean, engineers are actually structured people. We go about problem solving in a very structured manner. It sticks out like a sore thumb when they don't. I think the same is true of the way we would interact with the digital twin. But I'm just thinking of the analogy. Do you remember a very long time ago when they introduced Windows 3.1? There was you could move windows around, and you could have windows within windows, and you could put click on a little X at the top, and you could close the application and stuff. That was, before that, you had to know DOS, and you had to type all this stuff in. And I think that's a good analogy. Behind Windows is DOS, but the way it's presented to you is kind of easy and user-friendly and nice. And I mean, Windows 3.1 is so ancient now, and such a sort of, my goodness, did they do that in those days? But at the time, it was revolutionary. And there was an interesting, all the database applications suddenly were outmoded because Windows 3.1 came along and everybody expected to move a mouse and drag and drop and all that kind of stuff. But behind all that is a huge amount of A, elegance in the way they've programmed, and B, rigor in the way they've written software to make it look easy.
Yeah, and
same is true with twins in the future.
And that was a key then, that they then defined standards for how, so a program that ran in Windows just interacted with the mid layer, didn't it?
Yes.
And Windows handled all the drivers of the hardware underneath. And it became kind of plug and play.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's a dream. How are we going to get there from where we are now?
Slowly.
Yeah.
At the pace that the engineers and other people, I hasten to add, can cope with, but not at the pace of the slowest engineer. And we should constantly be challenging the people a little bit more, a bit more imaginative, a bit more venturous than they are accustomed to.
Mm.
So it's like, they're holding us back in a good way, and we're pulling them forward by the same piece of elastic in a good way. And that creative tension is what will advance it. We mustn't give in to the people, I've never done this, I'm going to do it again. But we also mustn't fly with the data geeks and go off into nirvana because of the absence of checks and balances.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned something about step by step earlier. And to me, I think that's the key, that you don't have to wait till you've got it all sorted to come up with something. That actually, it's like making a map. Mm. You can start with a map for the journey you want to go on, almost.
Yes. And
you fill in the details for that, and then you just keep advancing it. But that means the key is that you need to start with something that you can grow. Okay, this possibly the subject of a different thing, but this is where technologies from like graph databases may become important, because they allow you this flexibility of you can add the structure over time, keep it backwards compatible.
Here's another new analogy: sailing across the Atlantic. First of all, you need to roughly know where you're going, but you need to know, I'm going to sail across the Atlantic, I'm going to get to the east coast of America, but you don't actually have to decide whether you're going to go to New York or Boston just yet.
Yeah.
Or possibly even, Antigua or something like that. But first of all, you do need a boat that is adequately equipped to cope with the storms. And you also need a pretty good course to get you out of, let's imagine you're going from Southampton, out of the sun, not bump into the Isle of Wight, Effie, get yourself past Portland and get yourself past the south of Ireland. You don't want to bump into any of those things. So you have to be pretty precise about your next few days, but you don't have to be precise about anything after a week. By the time you've gone down 5 days, you probably need to know what you're going to do in the next 10 days after that. And you probably need to decide sometime by the time you're in the mid-Atlantic whether you're going to go to New York or Boston, but you don't need to know now.
But what I was going to thinking, what's coming to my mind is, of course, we should be as ambitious with the scale of what's being done. But one thing, I draw a parallel with trying to split those things that which are going to be executive or safety driven and need to be controlled, versus those things where it's just information or useful reference. And if you separate those two, and I'll give an example, we use Wi-Fi instruments on some of you know, high pressure, it's oil and gas, you know, it's high consequence. So although Wi-Fi is a fairly proven technology, I think we all know from when our internet doesn't function perfectly that it's not perfect. So if we separate what we just call information signals, like, by the way, how hot is this, it's for information, versus a true pressure trip, and you separate them, you actually get a really good way of being able to sort the information away. And I think that would apply really well here as well.
And maybe in 5 years' time, they'll have overcome the technical issues with Wi-Fi so that you don't need a hardwired pressure trip. But I completely agree. I think it's probably a mad idea to do that these days. Yeah.
That raises now a really important or interesting topic that's going to come up in the future. And that's both information efficacy, so and trustworthiness. So how sure are we that it's correct? But also information access. Because what you've just described there, Andrew, is, I guess, tagging an information with its usefulness. You could say, this is of enough quality that you can trip the plant, like, on this. This is well trusted. Whereas this other one, it's like, it's probably right. but it's not trustworthy enough for this level of executive action.
Correct.
And I wrote a blog recently on this about the Google, for example, as a search engine. It's not actually a validated model. It's good enough. Like, and so there's some operations we're going to do where that's okay. Like, it's good enough. So what we're talking about then is almost another dimension within the data model. I guess you've got an information governance level, or
yes, it's a voting level, isn't it?
Yeah,
criticality. I think this is really important, and then it will get the confidence in there, because there's so much data. I always come back to, I mentioned it in the previous one, you know, there's so much data, we're washing it. When does it become knowledge, and knowledge that you can really act upon? And that's really at the heart of this, what we're talking about, isn't it?
So I heard that Ordnance Survey maps, they make something like 15,000 updates a day. It's like insane. And that's because the scale of their model is so big now. So that's then that's a challenge that comes as the digital twin or the data model grows within it. You've got to keep on top of the updates.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy, because when they first produced Ordnance Survey maps, they were printed on paper. And then they went to, and this is an interesting distinction between the word electronic and the word digital. They went to printing them out on paper, but they're still very useful. You can't walk around the Lake District with an iPad and expect it to perform in bad conditions when you drop it, when it's raining. So paper is really important there. But behind all that is a digital way of reproducing Ordnance Survey maps. So they've moved from the electronic, where they produced paper and they did it in a very standard way, the way they'd always done it, and they migrated into a more digital way as they went. And they've probably only just started that journey. They probably have got much, much cleverer routines around the corner as to how they manage the map of Britain and the map of, you know, the rest of the world, which is a really powerful way of effectively keeping an accurate map of Britain. An accurate geospatial digital twin of Britain, might I suggest. Very limited. All it does is help you navigate the countryside, but actually it's possibly part of the UK digital twin.
So do you think it's actually possible to have a digital twin of an entire country?
Good question.
It's possible to have a limited digital twin, and it'll grow.
I mean, I can see layers that would build up a complete country of digital twin, but I see it perhaps more in themes you've mentioned about the geospatial and the geographical. I've got in my mind, probably because we're in the heart of the energy transition, a digital twin literally about the energy use and the generation and the supply, all about getting to this low carbon. I could see something around that.
And a digital twin of the gas pipeline network on the map that has the the pressure ratings of all the pipe work that makes up the network, so that when we do manage the transition from pushing methane and other hydrocarbons up and down this pipeline, we can then easily subvert that network to becoming a hydrogen transmission network. It will have different requirements of it because the pressures and the leak rate and all that kind of thing from hydrogen will be different from hydrocarbons, but fundamentally we're going to need a digital twin of it, and then we can simulate the behavior of that pipeline in this new regime.
So I guess two questions based on that. And then one is, the access to that information is sensitive, possibly.
Yes.
So so this isn't a digital twin that I can just access. Then this is a level 5 security clearance or whatever.
Well, you can access the MAPI bit, but you can't access the pressure in the pipeline bit.
Okay, so there's a layer of like current info or design info even of it.
Yes.
But then so that what if analysis, say you want to do a simulation. Now I've got an interesting scenario where I want to run some future states. I want to do it offline because I don't want to impact the current thing. So I need to take a copy of that, twin into some sandboxing environment. But then I need to run another system. And so going back to the digital twin is lots of different systems. How would that look? What would be the chain of systems that would come together to give you your answer? Because just to clarify that question, when we talk about you ask the digital twin, it's like the computer HAL in 2001, where there's this single interface. You just ask it a question, and it somehow knows what to do. So the question we're trying to answer here are what is the ability of the current gas distribution network to handle hydrogen? But the complexities of that are immense. And you also, is the model even up to date with the current state of all the pipe work? And I mean, there'd need to be some survey, but just what would the technology stack look like to answer that question?
Ever growing.
Yeah.
I would say that if anyone made a list of all the possible use cases for a digital twin, let's just keep it down to a process plant rather than the entire pipeline network of Britain on a map. We would probably, somebody could easily add another one perfectly validly. So I think one of the things we need to do is saying, for this period, this is our list of potential use cases. We maybe go for a few of them, and then we take stock, and then we say, well, what other use cases have cropped up in the intervening months? What should we add? What should we drop off our current list of use cases? So it's ever evolving. And I've been starting to say that actually the digital twin is probably a little bit like Teams or it's the core of a whole lot of satellite applications and use cases will feed off it. And some of them might use, like analogy of the digital twin, or say analogy of the phone, your GPS locator and your clock. Some of them might use your history of calls. Some of them might use a combination of all three. Some of them might use your photos. Multitude of different things, but all together eventually working off the common standards that is this phony thing and the software behind it to enhance our lives.
So what you're saying then is that the digital twin holds certain facts.
Yes.
And then if I wanted to do my flow simulation model, I actually use a flow simulation application that I plug on top. So like the lens that I look at the data goes through this special function that has all the knowledge about how to understand pressure drop in pipes and fluid behavior. That's not built into the digital twin. Or rather the data model. So what I should say is you're saying that application forms part of the digital twin, but to use it, you need to go up to that application and ask your question. There isn't a single interface that I type my question into that then goes, this looks like a flow assurance problem. I need my
Flow
flow
assurance
assurance
module.
module, and then it goes and sorts it out for you.
Yeah.
Actually, it's certainly for the, I mean, maybe that would happen one day, but we're thinking in
AI
the short term, yeah,
and
and natural language processing.
Yeah, you probably need an intelligent human being who knows his or her way around the digital twin and understands the potential and what needs to be done to get the sort of questions you're asking first. And eventually, if there's some clever AI machine sitting next to that knowledgeable individual or knowledgeable group of individuals, it will eventually learn the questions that the knowledgeable individual is capable of answering now, thus releasing the knowledgeable individual to go sailing at the weekends or to do a better job. This is one layer on top of what he or she is doing now.
So there's a path to evolution to get to that single portal.
Yes.
Where you say you get your initial function sorted and working with the data, then you can automate the next layer, which is deciding which function to use.
Yes, and likewise, the standards are important again, because we need to know, or at least an understanding of what the standards are. You and I would look at a drawing and say, oh, that's in inches or that's in millimeters. We would quickly switch our units of measure standard. We need to teach a machine to understand to understand the standard for the standard, so it knows what sort of units to use in particular.
You stretched my sort of thinking of digital twin there, David. I always see it as a shop window where you can get a view on everything, but the actual processing and the manufacturing or whatever the product is actually being generated elsewhere, and it's just a window on the top of those tools. So I see it a bit more like that.
To a certain extent, you're right, but let's take the 3D model. The digital twin during a project life is the part complete model still in the factory.
Yeah.
Likewise, the high simulation, likewise, the engineering data. It's the best shot we've got at the data at any given moment in the life of the facility. And this goes back to one attribute, is how trustworthy is this item of information, which goes back to maturity management, because you can say, well, look at all the mature stuff that's trustworthy and offer up the untrustworthy stuff to make the untrustworthy stuff more trustworthy.
So then, do you think there comes a point where the amount of data or the maintenance of the data in the digital twin, all the systems and everything, becomes more expensive than just doing it by hand? It ceases to become valuable. So what I'm thinking of is some kind of curve where early on, the payback from having the digital twin is more than it costs to maintain it. But it starts to go up exponentially with the cost of maintenance goes up exponentially with size. Such that you hit a point where there is a size of digital twin that it is just too big.
No, because the market will dictate.
But David, doesn't that come back to the product and the benefit? I know I started with that because if the objective is just to load it with every bit of data possible, then that's one push. On the other end, it's what products or uses come out of it, and that would dictate. And somewhere is infinite. The other one is very targeted.
Well, yes, but it's very targeted, but the target will be growing all the time.
Agreed.
The market, the reason I say the market will dictate was because if you've got this fundamental, first of all, every step we take has to add value. That is one of the golden rules of the digital twin. So if we decide that the pipeline simulation of the UK Ordnance Survey map important and it has value that we use it and we maintain it, then the market will dictate that that's something we ought to do. So that's the incremental step. And then even in the sort of 20 years future, the same rules apply. If we discover enhanced use of something, the market still dictates. And the things that aren't valuable will fade away. That's how we should start. And so that, and another thing we should try and encourage is so that when people contribute to the digital twin, they do it in a way that not only benefits them today, but benefits them tomorrow as well. 2 years hence and 4 years hence.
So what you're saying is the market will regulate.
The market needs regulation in order to regulate safely, but fundamentally the market will dictate the use cases, yes.
And it will only then accept ones that are valuable. So what you're,
It might accept ones that didn't work and drop them.
Yeah. So what I guess you are saying then that there is a size that becomes uneconomic, but the market would then just
it wouldn't pay for it, wouldn't fund it.
It wouldn't go forward.
No.
So yes, it is possible. I was thinking of the example of your mapping. Let's say we go down to the level of gravel on my drive, and so that we have the level of detail of that, you know, where every stone is, and so every time I go out and step on it, we've got to update it, and it's clearly ridiculous. Yes. And it's absolutely no value to anyone, and therefore, like you say, that would just never get sustained in a market in reality.
But there is I had an extension built a couple of years ago, 4 years ago now, and they didn't know where the drains were routed from my house into the street. They knew where the drains were up and down the street, but it was in my interest to provide the waterboard, route of the pipe from my house into the street, so that any future extensions, they wouldn't have the problem I had routing the drainage pipe. So they've now updated their digital twin. The next time somebody wants an extension in my house, they will know where the routing is. They actually won't, because I put a red line on a piece of paper where I thought it was.
But just at a slightly different perspective, we're living through what could be a perfect example of the need for digital information at a national level. And it's obviously to do with the virus and where the people are, where the virus centers are, where the responses are, where all of this data, and we see individual graphs, and it's, if ever there's sort of proof that a more joined up, structured, intelligent way of getting information together at local level, building up to national level, it's absolutely there and very compelling. And there's difficulty to get the proximity network modeling between people. Is just really an example that the data's ability to process all that data is not mature enough, but it should be. You know, we should use this as an example now and a driver to actually get things really structured.
Yeah, postcode data about where people caught viruses is absolutely all important.
Just a clear and current example, I thought, worth putting out.
I think that's exactly right, and that's what's trying to get built right now, I guess. And it's proving extremely difficult in reality.
Just back to your original point, could we do it at a national level? Well, I think we need to, in an increasingly joined up world, you know, where there's going to be increasing environmental challenges and all these things. We need to be able to know what happens when you influence the system at one end. What does it do elsewhere? And I think the digital twin and models is the way of explaining that.
If I may, when we were saying about how can we get there, like in the future, and Dave said slowly. So if we use the current example and current situation, the example right now is going at such a rapid pace, we can't keep up with it. So that's probably the reason why we're falling over ourselves, trying to actually create something. So
it's really difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that creative tension I talked about, really. You know, and there are probably people who are saying, we're going to need this, guys. You just don't need it right now, but we might need it in a year's time. Oh, why? The possibility of a pandemic. You need postcode information. Oh, yeah. So I think there are also going to be evolutionary jumps, step changes in the way we need our digital information. And as Andrew rightly said, today is a step change moment.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you reflect on it, because investing in something that's not a problem today to give you something useful tomorrow that you may not fully understand, that's in a way what we're talking about here. And I think, you know, we've got to get past that and get some sort of some investment, probably a government-led type level, I think, to actually get this in place, because it's going to be very hard to engage people and to invest, is what I'm saying.
Which is probably why the Digital Built Britain UK digital twin thing is growing now. They realize, they see the future and it's digital, and they are trying to corral in a rather herd cats kind of way the initiatives so that we are going in generally the same direction. I know it's really hard and complicated because I'm involved with it, and I know how there are many people saying, no, you can't go that way, you've got to go that way. Between us, we need to sort of go in the rough general direction.
I hope we can, yeah. Certainly the language around digital twins and data is more accepted now.
Yes.
I think 10 years ago, you could talk about it and it was, no one even knew. But as per our last discussion, well, what is a digital twin? That's still
up for grabs.
Don't open that up. I thought we solved that, Murray.
I think we have, of course we have.
But it is, those videos would have got it.
Yeah. That's it, yeah, some way to go. So like you say, Andrew, then getting investment behind it, another level. But it is key because these things, eventually folks get it, and the visionaries are the ones who saw it years ago. And then finally, when it happens, oh.
Yes. I mean, the visionaries.
Well, I've been saying that all along is what they often say.
Yeah, that's right.
But the visionaries are the Googles and the Amazons and other people that have been investing long before they could make money out of it.
Yeah.
Let's go to the too much information question for a moment, because, let's look at the COVID situation. We're bombarded with statistics, and we're bombarded with abusive statistics where they compare apples with shoes, and we get all sorts of misinterpretations and warping of the facts, and we also get just far too much information. How do we handle that? What can we as engineers do to help? What analogies are there out there that we've learned from? Interesting question.
The humans have got a great tendency to rebel against giving control away to things.
You've got teenagers, have you, Murray? Almost.
That's right. That's right.
I know the feeling.
That's right. It's actually the disrespect for authority is a survival technique.
Yes.
But for example, getting rid of paper. Well, we never actually accepted the disappearance of books. We take on new digital things, but we don't get rid of all the old stuff. So I think humans have an inbuilt regulation for stuff, but then even as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, well, not everyone does, because for some people, I guess you can get addicted to social media, and it's easy just to start taking in everything, and so it's not a common trait that people will turn off that information. Some people will just leave it on transmit and absorb everything.
Is that generational? So, for example, our generation, we love books. I'll just use books analogy. If I look at my daughter, she's 10, she's knows books to a point, but I can just see her completely moving over to, her electronic device. And look at cameras, the way that we used to take photos and had much joy in turning up at the shop and hoping at least one of our photos came out. We waited 3 weeks once we printed. Our children now only know their phones or parents' phones, and that's how photos are coming into fruition for them. So as they go through that evolution, what was known before starts to disappear. I don't mean to be crass, but as we do, as that generation does, because we're the ones hanging on to that. I just wonder sometimes whether things just see their way through, they evolve their way through as generations start to come up and others start to pass on.
My daughter has abandoned books and gone to a Kindle. My son, who married a publisher, in fact, hasn't. He's abandoned his Kindle and gone back to books. I'm kind of in two minds, really. I do like a nice book that you can turn the pages over and know that at the end of before you go to sleep, you're on page 254. It's all you get a bit lost.
But then they then come back, don't they? And there's a resurgence. So look at female thing now, but 50s dresses, all the swing dresses, everything is starting to have resurgence and come back, and that had gone. But somehow it's been brought back, not through our generation, but through the next one, but improved from before. So maybe there's also a balance there. I don't know what the answer is. It's just that's what I seem to witness. It's like there's an evolution of things that were, and they sort of like improving them as they go forward.
My son would say, and this is probably something that a Kindle doesn't give joy, whereas a book does.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something that's quite important for the digital twin, is it needs to give us joy, not just save money.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the value components of the digital twin is, does it give me joy in a kind of engineering, process planty kind of way? How does it give me joy? I mean,
so it's an emotional connection there.
Sorry?
That's the human emotional side. That's the emotional connection.
Yes.
That's what we can't let go. So back to Murray's point, that's probably what it is. It's like we're emotionally connected to things. It makes us feel happy.
Maybe my value thing about being safer, better, faster and cheaper needs to also include the word joy somewhere. I mean, better is probably joy in there.
That is a concept that the reason things become successful is because people like using them in the end. There's a degree of joy, but it's something that you're never allowed to talk about during the selection phase. It always has to come down to some distillation of value in some form of, and dollars at the end of the day. But the reality is that the reason it works is because of the emotional. People like this makes my day better.
And that's one thing you've touched on, something here is we've gone off the scientific and into a bit more, but it's important, the social and because this whole thing of joy, the world has pursued lower cost, more competitive, and of course that just eventually drives right down to the point where there's no joy left. It drives out the joy, for example. So I think there's actually quite a big, and maybe COVID, coming back to that, maybe that opens it up again. This side of it, being kind, looking out for each other, supporting. These things are now recognised and well-being. I think people are much more in tune with them. So we've got to get that balance.
Yeah, we do. I had a conversation with my kids on the way to school. They're big into Minecraft. And everything's manual in Minecraft. You have to put each block down, and if you get it wrong, you have to smash the block and put a different one down. So you build a house literally block by block. It's like digital Lego. And I said, is there no machines in Minecraft? Like, wouldn't that be a cool mod to have? And my youngest one said, oh yeah, there is a mod you can get called Minecraft Machines. And I said, well, look, wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't you get it? And one of my kids said to me, well, no, because then it would be boring. Because it would just be too quick and it would be no fun anymore. And I was like, I think you've nailed it. That you can go super efficient to a point, but actually if everything just becomes a touch of the button, actually there's no joy, there's no satisfaction.
I heard a beautiful little thing, it was called sweat equity, and sweat equity is what you get in something when you literally put your own hands and effort into it, and can't take all that away.
That's right.
Now I think back to AI, and I'm going to bring this up again. But one of the selling points of AI tech in particular is that it enables humans to get back to doing the things that they love. Because AI tech can automate the things, but actually then human beings, well, I'm probably taking it slightly a bit further, but human beings can get back to doing the things that they are good at, that brings them joy, that helps them to grow, all those kind of lovely things. I think there's a place for it, but there seems to be, as we're talking, it's sort of landing on me that there's this huge desire for human beings with everything's happening to get back to something that they can connect with, whether that's through tech, whether it's through products, that it doesn't matter. It's that connection's there. So I don't know, it's a really interesting conversation. I know we've gone off point a little bit.
That relates to Andrew's point about checks and balances, doesn't it? It's another check and balance that we, in our race to the bottom, in ever driving down costs and all that kind of thing, maybe we should say, but is it really getting us what we need? Is it kind of improving our lives? Just because we've saved another 10% off something, has it improved the life, not just our lives, but our customers' lives?
It comes down to value, doesn't it, Dave? And I mean, that's the thing, value on a far broader thing, value also encompassing joy as well as outcomes and efficiency and all that sort of thing.
I was just thinking of the conversation we had the other day with Ken. So we had recorded a series about careers, etc., in oil and gas for the future. And one of the things was we were talking about big problems in oil and gas that people would hopefully go on to solve. And one of the things that we very lightly touched upon is that actually, and I'm just trying to plug it all together, is that when you have something that you can connect with and everything, then there comes your purpose. When you have your purpose, you have your drive and your motivation to then go on and want to evolve in technology and industry and then solve big problems. So actually it kind of then hooks it all together like a jigsaw puzzle.
Brilliant. Well, we ended up somewhere. I wasn't,
Right.
wasn't thinking we would.
You know, you started with an analogy about a roadmap, David, and you know,
Ended up with joy.
yeah,
that's right.
We ended up in
There
a
are better things to do, worse things to do, aren't there? Really, I'd like to have a roadmap to joy.
Yeah, we jumped off the road and went into an interesting forest
Yes.
and admired the birds.
Always like a debate with you folks. It's very good.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, great. Thanks, guys.